right. All right. Welcome everyone. Let me just share a slide so you have both visuals and we'll get it started.
Let me, before you start, Keith,
yes.
let me just say to everybody, welcome. This is our last webinar for the AAPI month. Thank you for those who were able to participate. For those listening to the recordings, hope you guys get a lot out of this. This is also based off of a survey we did last year where there was a lot of interest in learning more about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I felt that my friend here, Keith, who has started this really wonderful organization, and then with Robert here, I hope that you guys will learn a lot and take a lot from this. And just to give you guys a little introduction, the Wingardium is a diversity, equity, inclusion education platform that also provides consulting and coaching services. They are also building an online community for everyone who is interested in learning about DEI. And then as for today's webinar, all the comments and activity answers, which we're hoping to do, should be sent directly to the group chat and the Q&As. But if you guys have any questions or you want to make any sort of comments, but you're a little shy or you're not sure, then you can just DM directly and send it to me and I can read it for you. And then finally, this wouldn't have happened if it weren't for our sponsors. I just want to mention that as well. Our platinum sponsor is Banfield. And then our diamond sponsors, BCA and Veterinary Emergency Group. So thanks to all of them as well. All right, Keith, take the lead.
All right, thank you so much, Yuri, for the introduction. Just want to double check, can everyone see the slides okay? Right, we're on that. Okay, cool. So welcome. So I'm very honored to be invited by AAVMP to do this webinar. This is a issue that's close to my heart, of course, and Yuri and I have had many discussions over this as well. So I thought this would be, so I put together a little bit something. Hopefully it will help or provide you with some resources and information that will help you guide you through some difficult times. As you can see on the slides, Kathleen Kaplar is also a member of the Wingardium, and she's the CEO, but unfortunately she is currently working with Doctors Without Borders in South Sudan. So she is not able to attend this meeting live, but she has recorded some videos to explain a few topics that is her expertise. So do excuse the quality and the sound of the videos because she is doing recording the videos under minimal resources in South Sudan in a camp that has a curfew and cuts out electricity and Wi-Fi. So, all right, let's get right into it. So who are we and why we're here? As you all know, this is the AAPI Heritage Month. And since AAVMP has a series, we're happy and so honored to participate. As you introduced a little bit before, we are a DEI education platform. We want to help everyone learn DEI in a new way, in a fun way, in a way that's not sitting in front of a computer for 30 hours listening to videos or reading articles after articles. It gets dull, it burns you out, and it turns a lot of people off from learning DEI. And we want to find a new way to do so. And of course, we want to provide services like this webinar or provide a program or consulting services to companies. And we want to spread DEI as wide, as far, and reach as many people as possible. Okay, so here are a few definitions of DEI. So diversity, equity, inclusion, we all know these words. And I won't go through all of them. You can read it yourself and we'll share these slides with you afterwards. We all understand the definition and the words on the surface level, right? But a lot of times it is harder to properly register them to actually understand what it means to us, each of us individually. And what I would like you to do right now is, if you can, type in a few words into the chat box to share what DEI is to you. So, what other words do you associate DEI with? Here are a few examples in the bottom. Those are all very positive examples. So some people like to attach the word belonging to DEI, accountability, and my personal favorite, because it makes a great acronym, justice. So it makes JEDI. So, there are, DEI is just a basic shell, right? That covers a few topics, but everyone has their own experience that they probably bring other words that works better with DEI. Love, that's a really nice one. Love solves a lot of problems, right? Yeah, so since we have a small group today, please don't be shy, and just we can chat, we can talk this whole night. My goal is just to have a conversation or just have a talk, nothing serious or too rigid. The slides just to provide you with extra resources and information. Okay, yeah, welcoming, participating, peace. I love these words. Yeah, participating is a really good one too, because along with inclusivity, right? We need everyone to participate in order to bring out the conversation and actually make changes. Compassion, yes, absolutely. Patty, that's reminding me of a not so great word, right? Okay, so sorry, many Patty. Okay, cool. That makes more sense. Okay, so yeah, just as we go through today's webinar, just keep thinking about words or how everything's making you feel, or what you have experienced, and maybe some of these topics are bringing that memory out of you. You can always share, and as the meeting goes, you can ask questions whenever you want, or share a comment in the comment box. Yui, if you can, if I didn't see the question, please remind me or interrupt me. It's all perfectly fine. We will just stop for a little bit and chat. So yeah, okay. And then the next part, we only have 6 people. So if you don't mind, please share your race, ethnicity in the chat box, and I will launch a quick poll here for you as part of the webinar. Okay, I think that's everyone in the poll. All right, so here's the result. It is great to see that nobody here thinks they're not biased at all. That would be a dangerous sign, as we all know that everyone has at least a tiny bit of bias, right? It is hard to not have bias these days because of our upbringing and all the our experience in the past. This whole world is full of biases. So I'm very happy to see that we're all self-aware. I think that is one of the hardest things to do, but also the best place to start. And that's where the focus of tonight's webinar is, to find the source within ourselves, either be in a different situation or facing discrimination or biases, we can look at ourselves first and then going from there to see how you can best deal with the situation or how you can best help yourself. So now here, we have extracted a few values from AVMP. So, we're listening here to see what AVMP is trying to do for its members. And that brings the question of, what does it mean to be an Asian in this field? So if you can, share a few words in the group chat. What does it mean to be an Asian in this field? And we can also talk. You can just raise your hand if you want to chat. Why does it make you feel that way, or what makes you feel that way? Misunderstood, token, of course, stereotypes. Modern minority is a big word, a big one. It was very intriguing, interesting the first time I read about modern minority and how we are used to, as a tool against other minority groups, to relieve the white guilt of them not doing enough. Foreign. I think Yui was just telling me a story about that in the South, that people just think they don't trust Asians, Asian vets, just because how we look.
Yeah, I'll also add, I have a friend who is Malay descent, grew up in Singapore and studied in the UK, went to vet school with me in Scotland. He has gotten multiple clients who have told him that he doesn't want a Chinese vet to see his dog. And that is when he was practicing in London. So he shrugged it off as, well, it happens all the time here anyways, but I think that's definitely one of the more sadly common situations that I think a lot of us experience. And even if a client doesn't verbally tell us that, you do have moments where you do wonder whether they're thinking something of that. But yeah.
Does anyone here share similar experiences or have some thoughts to add? Okay, that's perfectly fine. If you have comments or questions, you can feel free to type in the chat box or message it directly to Yui, and we will post them anonymously. Okay, so we have a video from Kata, and she is going to talk a little bit about biases and stereotypes because she has a background in psychology, and she would like to just share a little bit of her expertise in this field.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kata. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm very excited to do this with you. I know that you already had a few exercises and discussions, and I'm just going to talk about in this section biases, stereotypes, and a little bit of social psychology behind their definitions, what they are, where they come from, what we do. So a bias can be defined as a natural inclination for or against an idea, a thing, a person, a group. Biases are learned, and that means that they are highly dependent on where we learn them. So the environment and the identities of the person, social, economic, linguistic, cultural. We all do have biases, and so the existence of them is not necessarily a problem. It could become problematic if and when they are unconscious, so we don't know about them. When they are unchecked, meaning that we don't challenge their existence, we don't challenge their reasoning, and when we base our decisions and actions on biases, and especially when this is about people in positions of power, who don't know or don't care about their own biases and actually make their decisions based on them. And that's when it could become discriminatory and unfavorable treatment for individuals or groups. A stereotype is a generalized belief towards a particular category of people. Stereotype or stereotypes happen because of the way the human brain functions, which is a fascinating work, and it does a lot of very complex, very sophisticated operations in very, very short time. On the other hand, to be able to carry out all those operations, it also tends to rely on a bit of lazy solutions, time and again, shortcuts, and stereotypes are one of them. So experienced attribute of one individual is applied to an entire group of the similar category. That's what the brain does for efficiency. And we're so used to it that most of the time we don't even realize we're operating in these shortcuts, and again, we don't necessarily always challenge or verify. Biases and stereotypes and intergroup relationships. So social psychology has something that's called social identity theory that explains some of these. And this again goes back to how the human brain functions, and back in the time when humans were living in caves, hunting and gathering from tigers, because there and then belonging to a group very literally meant survival. If you didn't belong to a group, you'd fight. And so the human brain has evolved a lot, but hasn't really moved away from the very basic assumptions since then. Still equals belonging to a group to relative safety. And on the other hand, not belonging to a group and those who don't belong to that group equals to potential threat. Group that you identify as a member of can be called your in-group, and what happens is that you automatically assign more positive attributes to all the other members of the in-group, because that's your safety, that's your belonging. And so individuals who do not belong to this group, they are in your out group, and again, you will automatically assign less positive or more negative attributes to members of your out group. So you can see how this relates to stereotypes and biases and judging people without actually knowing who they are and what they do and what they like. So before I let you go back to your exercises, Keith, I would like to ask you to think about for a moment what in groups you belong in. And the important thing here is that it's a group that you identify as a member of. So it could be your school alumni, it could be your choir, your running club, your supporting whatever, basketball team, all of those, as long as you identify as a member of, could be your groups.
Sorry, I understand there's a lot of them are a little bit hard to hear. That's the best equipment she has access to over there. But we will provide a transcript of this video afterwards to you if you want to read more into it. But if you caught most of what she said in the video, we would like you to think a little bit about your own inner circles, in groups of your daily environment, wherever a group of people that you feel belong to, or you feel comfortable enough to be your inner group, and think about the types of biases that's attached to that, and or the other kind of stereotypes that is attached to that. And I would like to open up the floor and have a small discussion here if you would like to participate. We can talk about how these biases and stereotypes are displayed, how they affect each other, how do we recognize them, and how do we prevent them? Because as we found out in the poll, that everybody thinks they all have at least a tiny bit of biases, and I would like to, have us all bring that out to the table. I can start. As a Chinese born and raised in China, and then came to the US, I found out that Chinese are extremely racist in a way that we don't like people who are different to us, different, from us, and extremely judgmental for any sort of standards that don't meet their requirements, and think that we are always the golden standard, right? Like if someone does not qualify that, then they're the bad one. Then they're the outside people. So especially when we have our local dialects, it makes it much easier to discriminate against others, or express our biases even just out loud.
Well, I can share mine. I would say that because I grew up in Japan, and there was, for like political and historically, there's always been a conflict, at least in the most of 20th century, between Japan, Korea, and China. There's a stereotype towards Korean people that a lot of Japanese people still have. There's stereotypes towards Chinese people that a lot of Japanese people still have. And I think that while people don't want to admit to it, it's still present. And it has permeated my thoughts in the past as well, because I grew up in Japan with those thoughts that was very abundant and around me, despite me growing up in an international school where I had a lot of Korean friends and classmates and a lot of Chinese friends and classmates. It was like, when you hear people say, oh, but you're different from those people. You're different from that other racial category that, you identify as. It was like a very similar mindset to that.
Anyone else?
So I took one of those Harvard implicit bias tests,
Yeah.
They're always kind of shocking and unsettling. And I took the one, are you biased against Asian people? And I was really horrified to discover that I actually am. And it's because I grew up completely surrounded by white people, so, I spent all of my life basically trying to assimilate, because that was how I could survive, right? And not be outcast the whole time. But I was always typically the only Asian in every class through all of my schooling, or at least the only Japanese American person. So I was not around a lot of Asian people at all. And so, yeah, I was really shocked and horrified to find that I actually have a bias against Asians. So it's something that I have to work on.
Yeah, that's the actually very interesting perspective, right? Because in the Western culture, Asians are always lumped together, and supposedly we would be each other's in a group. But somehow, because of our upbringing, because of our history, and we turn against each other, and we're discriminating, towards each other. Yeah, absolutely. Please DM Yui, and she can post everything anonymously. And to that point, I just want to share a thought, because I also personally have gone through that as well. My parents brought me here to a very white town in New Jersey, and in order to actually have a social life, and most of you don't know me, I'm a very chatty person. I'm very outgoing. I like to do things, and the first week would destroy me when I couldn't talk to people, because I didn't speak English, and two, nobody around was like me. And that was the first time I left China. And like Kaori said, I try everything to assimilate, and using the term whitewash myself, just so I can fit in. But because of going through that experience, I found that, sometimes I get caught in a limbo of doing things I never thought myself to do. So a lot of times when we have gone through discrimination or other forms of injustice, we form this unconscious stereotype about the villains in that scenario, right? Be it white folks that's around us, be it other Asians around us. When we encounter someone else who looks just like the aforementioned villains, our feelings towards that person that comes up at that moment is a result of us directly applying the stereotype, simply because the appearance of that person fits a profile, regardless of that person's action, right? As blunt as that is, and as obvious as that is, sometimes we don't actually register them until we've done it ourselves. And we may or may not even catch that afterwards. And you taking the Harvard implicit test and finding out that you're discriminatory against Asians, have you actually thought about some moments that you actually did that, or did you remember certain things that came up because the test pointed that out?
I think mostly when I was a kid. Yeah, there were, if there was another Asian kid in my class, I would just not try to be friends with them because they would hurt my social status,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm not proud of it. It's definitely not the person I hopefully am today. So
I think it is okay, right? Because as long as you didn't do anyone harm, this is how we learn. If we can't spot it ourselves, we need someone to point it out for us, right? And that actually reminds me of how the corporate world what the corporate world tells women, right? You need to compete with all the other women in the senior management level because they are taking your spot. That was a dialogue that's trying to turn them off of shattering the glass ceiling, trying to help other women, because the hidden narrative is, we can only allow one woman up here, and you need to be one of the boys. You need to, be like a man. But women are not men, right? And women in higher levels should help each other. And same as Asians, if we are in an environment that has very few of us, the society, that environment is molding us to pitting us against each other, because that's easier for their dialogue. That's easier for their traditional or what they're comfortable with, because we're not taking over. And I think that's the most important point to start with, right? How do we find our own inner voice? Who do we want to be? Like you said, hopefully you're not the same person today anymore. But that might be a little bit harder for a teenager to realize, because all we wanted to be is just fit in, be popular, and be one of them. So as adults in veterinarian world, a field that is very discriminatory against Asian, I think it is a very important thing to realize who you want to be and what is the dialogue that you are having with yourself. Because if we're beating ourselves down, then nobody can bring us up, right? If we're trying to make another Asian colleague fail, then white folks are definitely not going to help us if we're not even helping ourselves. So I think I would like to bring a point that I randomly came across the other day while doing chores at home, actually. I was having a really rough week, and I realized I haven't done meditation for a long time. And as we all know, meditation is the best way to collect your thoughts, to calm yourself down, and to regroup. But we tend to actually forget to meditate when we actually need it the most. So it's potentially good to step outside of what you're feeling or struggling through at your workspace and see what you're feeling and needing at that moment, right? Maybe it's just to take a break from the environment. maybe it's to find an ally in your colleagues, be it Asian or non-Asian. So maybe if you're struggling in the vet field because of discrimination, it might be better to find out what you need the most at the moment instead of trying to fix the problem, because that problem is way bigger than yourself or even a group of Asian veterinarians. And I just want to pass on that thought that actually helped me a lot at that moment and helped me regroup and start the week fresh.
I also want to add, I think this is sort of like a double, sort of a double whammy, being an Asian person, but also being in a profession like the veterinary industry where everybody's very highly educated and everybody is overall extremely intelligent. There's, at least in me, I will also admit that there's some like bias towards people's education levels. You know, I work with a lot of clients who are from like lower income or people who maybe graduated high school but have had to work since for whatever reasons. And there's no conscious bias there towards them. But when I notice after like my appointments or after the end of the day, and this isn't even through work, this is like if I'm like in a social gathering and I happen to come across people who have had like PhD or masters, or, you know, earlier, I think before this recording started, I was like telling you how Kaori is like a pathologist and she's board certified. I'm like using all these jargons and saying, ah, she's so cool. But obviously Kaori is way more than that. You know, she's more than just her board certification. She's more than a pathologist. She's an individual who is already extremely colorful and already has so many special part about her that makes her unique. And I think I am definitely open to admit that I still do carry that bias towards people's education. Like even at work, some of the smartest people I've actually worked with aren't veterinarians. They're like our veterinary assistants. There are front desk staff. There are, you know, the people who are there just taking care in the background and don't have the kind of title that shields us a lot of the times. And I think that being Asian, being East Asian especially, and having the privilege of having that education accessible to us, I think we tend to forget it. But that's probably something that we all need to be more aware of.
I think I'm absolutely guilty of that too. Because growing up in China, the only thing we ever compare about is studies, right? Your grades in school, your ranking, and then your height and weight, of course. But even till this day, you know, I can still hear my parents' voice. You need to get into a college that has a good ranking. You know, you need to get into Ivy League, or Ivy League is better than other schools. But we've all in our lives met a lot of people, even if they have no degree, high degree, you can see them thriving every single field. But that's why it is important to register our own biases, right? And our own stereotype. The stereotype here being, if a person doesn't have a degree, that person must be stupid or, you know, not as smart as other people. But we all know that's not true. But our mind works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, and it looks like Karori wrote in the chat that her parents, you know, basically they didn't think she was worth anything until she got a degree from an Ivy League. And I think also probably, you know, immigrant parents feel especially strongly about this too, because, you know, they've seen how the world treats them and the country treats them, and having that Ivy League as a title, it's like a shield, I think, you know, that kind of justifies all the hard work and the prejudice that they've been through, and also to tell the world, hey, look, my kid is brilliant just like your kid.
Yeah, And sorry, can I hear the name again? I don't want to say it wrong. Kaori?
Kaori or Kaori?
Kaori. Yeah, Kaori, to your point of getting a degree from Ivy League, I actually got a master's degree from Ivy League, but it's in liberal arts. So my parents told me it's still useless. But, you know, I digress. So moving on, we have, I'm not sure if everyone know who Lily Zheng is. She is a DI, sorry, wrong pronoun. Lily Zheng's pronoun is actually they, them. So they are a DI strategist and a champion maker, a change maker. And they suggest that after we acknowledge that we have a flaw, gap, or issue, we should move on to question on how to make it better. So, and we can design better. That's their quote. And so this is a time for brainstorming. What would it look like or feel like if you worked in an environment that's not biased, but inclusive instead? What would immediately be different? Actually, quick show of hands, has anyone ever thought about that? You've struggled and you've dealt with discriminations. Have you thought about, dreamed about the perfect working environment? What would that be like?
Do you mean like in a specific work environment, like a clinical setting, or do you just mean like in general?
Anything you can think of. What would it feel like if it's not biased, but very inclusive? There's no discrimination. How would it feel like?
It would feel comfortable.
Okay, that's a key word. You can also type in the word, yeah. So you can type in the word in the chat as well if you don't feel like talking. Respected, okay, of course. Comfortable and respected.
I think safe as well.
Absolutely. Valued. Yes, I think being an Asian and women in the workplace, it can be easy. As a man, I would, I can't imagine feeling doubling down all the pressure and different discriminations and hurdles you have to go through. Appreciate it. Absolutely.
Well, the female piece in vet med is really complicated, right? Because in veterinary schools, where the vast majority actually are female. Yeah. And so, when you're in vet school, I don't think most women or female students feel particularly oppressed or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's just then you go out into the profession and, most of the practice owners are male. Most of the leaders in our organization are male. Like you hit that ceiling. Most of the administrators in the vet schools are male. That's the complex piece. We haven't caught up to that yet.
I think that's also a general statistics too, because we've caught up gender-wise. We've caught up in education, right? Because across the board right now, there are more female students in school than male students. But somehow, when you step out into the professional world, senior level management is still male dominant. And we have a comment here. How do I say your name correctly?
You can call me Han.
Han? All right.
Or Hugh Han.
Hugh Han? Han commented that she had clients that refused to call her doctor or unknowingly called her Ms. Yeah, I think, so we actually have our monthly newsletter, and in one of the newsletters, Tata has written a piece renting. And one of the things that she wrote about was that she was learning Mandarin and on a phone app, and a picture showed up. It was just a blurb of a doctor with all the outfit and gears, but she had hair, a long hair. And even for someone who's studying DEI, who's kind of a DEI expert, her first reaction was, "Oh, nurse." Right? It is a bias or stereotype that the previous generations or education system have drilled down into our brain, and it is so hard to correct this kind of memories even deep down when we're growing up. So, which I think is even more of a calling for us to take a look at ourselves, to see where we need to help ourselves to see things, where we need to learn more and about our own biases and stereotypes, and how can we draw inspiration to actually contribute in different ways to change the work environment or change ourselves. Yui commented that she get that all the time. People see her in scrubs and immediately assume you're a nurse. Yeah. All the respect to nurses, it's still insulting. Right.
And I don't know if insulting is the right word. I think that's probably not the right word because I have so much respect for nurses. So I want to mention that. It's just that traditionally there was such a gender role to nurse and doctor. Women are nurses, men are doctors. So it's just, as somebody who worked hard for my DVM, it's offense. There's no other way to say it. It's just, I hate that somebody just puts me in that binary gender role, even in my profession. I think that's probably sums up my feeling the most.
Absolutely. And so to share another kind of story about very unconscious bias creeping into our daily lives. So I think all the agony people are going through, discrimination or other biases, stereotypes, is the aftermath of putting others down to make themselves feel better, right? Or more important. Or just a culture that has a sense that that's something necessary to do. So once I was with a girl I was dating, and she showed me a picture of her and her best friend. And she said, "Look how pretty she is." And my instant reaction, who knows who taught me that, but my instant reaction was, "Oh, you're still prettier." And I thought that was the right answer to say, right? Like, why? Of course, every girl that wants to be called pretty, but she was very confused and angry and asked me, "Why would you say that? I did not ask for that. Why would you compare me with my best friend?" Then I realized that it's the culture that raised me that thinks everything needs to be compared, right? So someone would win, right? Most likely is, your family compared someone else to you, or somehow finding a way to say that we're better, right? The quickest example is Asians like to compare heights. Somehow taller is always better, or skinnier is better. Who knows, and it's just always been there. And everything needs to be compared, so someone will win, and we're just better than that. And even after running away from that culture for half of my life, I still unconsciously do it. And I somehow always forget that, how the other person would feel, or even this whole thing is necessary or not, right? So the point of me telling this story is to say that, before we can design and fix a system, we can take a deep dive within ourselves and even ask people around us to see that if we miss something in the dusty corners of our head. So there's another quick video.
Hi again, I'm back. I'm very curious to hear and see what you came up with as your ideal, more inclusive, less biased working environment. In this section, I'm just going to talk about, again, a little bit of social psychology and a couple of more practical ideas on what we can do to reduce bias, our own and those around us in our environment. First, that sounds very, very common sense, is to be aware and check our own biases. As I talked about it before, biases become problematic when they are unconscious, we don't know about them, and when they are unchecked or unchallenged because we don't want to change them. So a very good first step is to be aware of what our biases are, and time and again just question our own actions. Do I do this? Did I say this? Do I think this? Because of something that's a reasonable, rational explanation, or am I just falling back on my shortcuts? And if I do, what do I do then? So that would be the first step. And then go back to social psychology. They also came up with another theory called the contact theory, and it's very much what it sounds like. I like to call it exposure. A lot of this research has been done about different groups and intergroup relationships, and apparently the more individuals are exposed to contact with individuals from other groups or their outgroups, the more it reduces their biases. And again, it sounds very simple. The more you see, the more different experiences you observe, the more you understand of how other people operate, what their experiences are, how they are different from you, how they are similar to you. And then this leads to the other theory, the common in-group theory. So we talked about in-group and out-group and how you assign positive attitudes to people in your in-group. We also thought about a little bit about our own in-groups. So the trick here is that if there's an individual, multiple individuals who would not belong to the in-group that you identify with, go try to find another one. And you know, this could be that in your in-group as a medical professional, you belong to a certain group, but you might be in another in-group of people loving or people hating Game of Thrones. And of course, the composition of that in-group is going to be very different, probably with overlaps, but very different from the other in-group. And because of your brain and our brain functions, in your in-group, more positive attributes to be assigned to the other members. So all of a sudden you are with your other Game of Thrones haters and they belong in your in-groups, so you have started reducing your bias. That's for the theory. And a couple of practical ideas. One, often labeled amplification. This has gotten quite a bit of exposure during and after the Obama administration, because there was a lot of talk about how female staffers would actually group together and on meetings and other work-related events. If one came up with an idea, a proposal, and was running the risk of being ignored or talked over, then others would pick up the same idea, repeat it intentionally and repeatedly. And so with that, amplifying the idea and also crediting the person, often female, who came up with this. This is something everybody can try out at work. And this also helps building relationships potentially with people who might be in and out of yours. And then when it comes to activism or demanding change, and I'm using the term demand intentionally because requests only get us so far. So when you are demanding change in your workplace or school or any kind of environment, being specific and asking exactly what you want and need to happen can go a long way. Even if we assume that the decision makers and the employers and the organization has all the best intentions, they probably don't know where to start because they don't understand your experience, or they don't know what to do to make it better. So just saying that work environment needs to be more inclusive is not going to be very helpful. If you want universal parental leave, regardless of family composition, that's what you need to say. If you need more accessible toilets or more gender neutral toilets or better balanced office temperature or halal food in the office canteen, then those are the things you need to say. And also it takes away quite a bit of the threat that's often associated with demanding DEI related change, because all you ask for is halal food in the cafeteria. That's probably easily manageable, and then it tames the whole discomfort and potential fear around, oh, what do we have to implement as DEI changes? And then inspired by the good old British metro system, see something, say something. And this could often be uncomfortable. It takes a lot of practice, but easiest way to stop something that probably wasn't intentionally offensive or intentionally discriminatory is to say it. So this is often in interpersonal interactions. Somebody says something or does something that is offensive, inconsiderate, out of line. Very simply, we can just say, this was not cool, this is inappropriate, this makes me uncomfortable. And most of the time, people would stop in their tracks and at the very least say sorry, and hopefully not do it again. So again, simple place to start. And then of course, this work never stops. It just goes on. So I would be curious to hear what you think you can do to make your work environment more inclusive, less discriminatory. So over to you.
Okay, so after hearing Kata's explanation and suggestions, has there been any new ideas that come to mind? Or even if you can think of something that you can do tomorrow? So the time's almost up. You can have, if you have questions, feel free to ask. If you want to chat a little bit more, I'm happy to stay a little bit longer. Yeah, so.
I have one.
Yes.
So despite my awareness of pronoun use and myself feeling comfortable using she, her, they, them for myself, I still make the mistake. Also having a family member who recently shared with me that they identify as non-binary, I still reactionary when I see somebody enter a room or I talk to somebody, I think I still use the binary pronouns. So I think that is something that I have been trying to remind myself to use as often as possible and not jump into assumptions. So I need to continue to practice using they, them pronouns to everybody until they specifically say, no, I identify as she, her, or I identify as he, him, or yes, thank you, keep calling me that. So that's my immediate task.
Yeah, no, I agree. Even with the presentation that I've looked through dozens of times, when it came to Lily Zheng, I still said she, consciously, and then quickly call myself. It is this kind of unconscious norm, I guess, is really hard to change. So we just need to keep calling ourselves out or having an accountability person to call it out for you.
Yeah, and sorry,
No,
I just want to add one more thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, Keith. I think also it's really important to not guilt ourselves when we make these mistakes. Because I think when we shame ourselves or we feel embarrassed and we hold on to that feeling, we become more and more discouraged to make these changes. So I think we just need to embrace our flaws and imperfections. And, we're all humans and we make dumb mistakes all the time. And it's like vet med too, like even practicing medicine, like we make mistakes all the time and doctors aren't superhumans. And I think the same applies for the DEI work. Like Keith always tells me like DEI is like a lifelong learning. So I think that's something that I think we need to just be kinder to ourselves as well. Like be strict, but also kind.
And I think
following along on that, I think it's important for us to all be kind with each other, right? Like I think what I've seen in amongst folks who do a lot of DEI work or social justice work, right? Like they start pinpointing your flaws or other people's flaws and, you know, zeroing in on, you know, what they screwed up or, and I think we all have to be forgiving of each other and patient as we all learn, right? Because this is all new and it's constantly shifting. An example that I had was, you know, when the whole land and labor use statements came out, you know, like I just threw it into my syllabus, and then somebody sent me an article about, you know, written by a Native American person who was offended by that. And it's just like, what am I supposed to be doing? Somebody just tell me what to do. You know, it's hard. You're constantly learning and constantly screwing up in this area.
I think to follow up with that point, we're also a culture raised by our parents telling us what to do, and that we don't have a voice or opinion, right? I think that's a issue that most Asians suffer through, because we are probably the most voiceless group right now, right? There's a lot of racial talk, black and white racial talk. Asians are somehow always left out. And if we're feeling discriminated or even ignored or feeling invisible at workplaces, we need to learn to gain our voices back and need to actually speak up. It's probably one of the things that we all need to learn and relearn. And like Kata said, you know, demanding is probably the most effective and quickest way, but learning how to demand is the skill. So that being said, this is the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to connect with us on any of the platforms. And we are building a community. If you just go to our website, it will lead you to our community platform. You can view everything on it without registering, but if you register as a member, you can post questions, comment, or share resources and read our newsletters. And we welcome you to start any sort of conversation, or if you need help, reach out. We're more than happy to help. And we hope you find like-minded people on our platform to share your thoughts, ask questions, of course, and maybe help each other through a rough time. So thank you for your attention and the conversation. And I hope I provided something that will be helpful to you in your career. And I hope to see you all soon in the future.
Thank you so much, Keith and Robert as well. Thank you for everybody who participated today, and hopefully a lot of people will be listening in soon because this has been really great. And then for everybody, this is the end of our AAPI month webinar series. I hope you guys all had a chance to watch or participate in some of the webinars. And yeah, thank you everybody for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.